broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone. I'm just waiting a couple of minutes because we've got quite a lot of people attending this webinar, and we're just waiting for a few more to come on. Wait for a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, well, it's 2 minutes past the hour, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend the Ringgold webinar, bringing it all together, uniting data sources to reach your goals. My name is Diane Cogan, and I'm VP of Global Sales at Ringgold. I'll be presenting the webinar today with my colleague Christine Orr, who's our Sales Director for North America, and also on the line are Jay Henry, our Chief Marketing Officer, and Beth Hoskins, our Sales Development Manager. If you have any questions during the presentation, then please type them into the questions box, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll collect all the questions up, and then we'll answer them at the end, just to keep the flow of the talk. And at the end, after the webinar, we'll be sending you all a link to the slides and the recording, so you'll be able to access it, and if you've come in a bit late and missed something, you can catch up. So the agenda for today, if I can get my slide to, is there. We'll start with a brief introduction to Ringgold, and we'll talk about the power of bringing data sets together. We'll talk about 3 data linking scenarios, and Christine's going to go into some detail with you for those. We'll talk a bit about getting your data ready for linking, and then we'll show you a case study of one of our clients that created a 360-degree view through linking data sets. And then we'll round off with a summary. So wanted to start with a rather nice quote, very appropriate, from Tim Berners-Lee. Data is a precious thing and will last longer than the systems themselves. And I think the key here is that the data is a really precious asset. Your systems are going to change over time, but you should be looking after your data because it's valuable and it can provide key business intelligence for you. So just a short word about Ringgold and what we do. Ringgold's developed and curates a database of around about 500,000 organisations in the scholarly communications space, the Identify database. This covers all sectors and regions, and it's growing by about 25,000 records a year, which is 5%, but it changes by around 35% a year, and that's when the National Health Service in the UK reorganises or the French regions change. We have to map all that in the database, so it's kept up to date. And we have a number of services related to the Identify database. We help clients to normalise and enrich their organisation data attached to customer records, prospects, authors or members, so that that data is fit for purpose. We also have a specialised database on licensing consortia, and we help publishers who need structured books metadata to aid discovery via our ProTV service. We use real people, not computers or algorithms. We have 25 in-house staff and 40 country experts worldwide, and many of us come from scholarly publishing backgrounds or data governance backgrounds, so we have good knowledge of this area. So our mission is really all about linking things together. We provide identifiers and structured data to power the efficient exchange of information throughout the scholarly research community. So why is Ringgold talking about linking data sets? It's because we've had 15 years of experience in empowering our clients to do just that for a variety of business purposes. Organisational data is present in all data systems, so you'll have an Oxford University record probably in your CRM or in your financial system, your authentication system, and membership database if you're a publisher or a society. And we give you the power to pull all those different versions of Oxford together to create some business intelligence about that organisation. So why should we link data? Linked data sets create opportunities for very valuable business insights. One data set can perhaps provide one attribute, but if you link this to a second and third or a fourth attribute, you can start to build up a real picture of your constituents, whether they're subscribers, researchers, authors, or members. For example, you might have many authors at one institute, but no subscribers to your journal. You could use this information to help make a new sale because you now know that there's interest at that organisation in the content of the journal. Or, for example, societies can look at their membership in relation to their authors, their customers and editors. Research organisations can link researchers together with common interests, locally, nationally and globally, and help them locate relevant content or grants, even laboratories. So linking data sets increases efficiency and can reduce costs because you're not spending time trying to cross-check something between 3 different systems because those systems are now speaking the same language. With full data integration, you can view all of your interactions with an organisational customer if you're using the Ringgold data. But the final point's really important. Data are potential assets, but they need to be good, clean and unambiguous and able to interoperate with other data. So what's the most effective way to link data sets? To link data, you need something that's common to both sets or all of the sets, something that doesn't change, and something that's unambiguous, like a persistent identifier. Persistent identifiers are very valuable in linking data sets because they are unique, they're persistent, and they're usually meaningless in themselves. They're usually just a number, and they can be very powerful in helping to link data sets. Persistent IDs help to disambiguate one entity from another. For example, you might have an organisation with the same name, 2 organisations with the same name. Northeastern University, there's one in Boston, USA, and there's one in Shenyang in China. Which one is your customer or research partner? Or UCL, is that the University College London? Is it the Catholic University of Leuven? Or is it Union County Library in the States? An organisational persistent ID will tell you that. Persistent IDs also eliminate the problem of duplicates. So, for instance, UCLS versus University of California, Los Angeles, that's actually the same organisation, but if it's entered differently in your systems, it looks like 2 different organisations. Or Oxford University versus the University of Oxford, that would show up as two organisations in your systems if you don't have some sort of identifier to disambiguate them. So persistent IDs are the most effective way to link entities across data sets, linking exactly what you meant to join together without any errors. And accurately maintained persistent IDs enable us to really trust in our data. They can help to link systems together so that staff can see data previously unavailable to them, as it was in a different departmental silo. And this 360-degree view of the interactions with the customer can be a really powerful thing, particularly in a customer service setting. And we've had one question about that already when people were registering. It means that your staff can see all of those interactions with a customer and help those customers without the need to make inquiries into 3 or 4 different other departments or delay the information they're sending back to the customer. Research organisations can link researchers together with common interests, locally, nationally and globally. Societies can look at their membership in relation to authors, customers and editors. And author affiliations can be linked for bibliographic reasons or for the payment of APCs for open access journal articles. Many persistent IDs are attached to large amounts of metadata which support their use and can be really, really valuable for you. And bridge identifiers can be used to pull proprietary data sets together, effectively to create a mashup of information that's not been linked before. There's a broad range of persistent IDs for people, places and things. And I've included some examples here. For people, I mean, there are lots of different ones, but there's the ISNI, there's the International Standard Name Identifier, there's the ORCID ID, Scopus ID, Researcher ID. For things, there's many different persistent IDs for things, but the key ones I put here, the DOI for articles or chapters, the ISSN for journals, ISBN for books. And for organisation, there are many persistent IDs. There's the ISNI for organisations, there's the Ringgold ID, there's the DUNS number, MDR PID numbers, Library of Congress mark code list for organisations, GRID, NCES and IPEDS, those are educational identifiers, and we'll talk a bit more about those later. And the Open Funder Registry ID. So quite a lot. We've all got persistent IDs. We've got a tax ID, a social security ID, a driving license, passport number, that sort of thing. And there's a real abundance of them for people, places and things. And many have different purposes. Some of them overlap. And many have a lot of metadata attached to them. But they should hold the key attributes that I mentioned before. They should be unique. Each entity should have a single one of its type. They should be persistent, so they don't change without very good cause. And they should be meaningless. So if an attribute of the entity changes, the ID doesn't need to change because it's just a number. It doesn't matter. So persistent IDs can be completely open and free to use. They can be open under certain restrictions, or they can be proprietary. They need to be attached to enough metadata to disambiguate one entity from another, but they need no more than that. However, as I said before, many persistent IDs are attached to quite a large amount of metadata, and that really is added value for people using them. So just to give an example of some persistent IDs and metadata, I'm going to use, obviously, Ringgold as an example. And this is really showing the different things that we capture in the Identify database. In fact, a number of people on this call are already working with Ringgold, and they've started to disambiguate and structure their data. But for those that are not familiar, I wanted to just summarise. So we include a Ringgold ID, which is an organisational ID, and they're numbers like this down the left-hand side of the screen. We also include hierarchical links, so you can see that this part of Graz University is indeed part of Graz University, and that's all coded, so that those linkages are all there. We include basic metadata, such as location information, and that can be very valuable. So it means that you don't need to gather that information if you have a Ringgold ID. We include a URL, and we include alternate names, and that could be a former name, it could be an also known as, it could be a translation if we have the title of the organisation in another language. We also include descriptive metadata, so we would have perhaps the sector, whether something's academic, whether it's corporate, whether it's government or health. We also include a tier classification, so whether something, for example, is a large research-heavy university or a school. So you can differentiate. And for the academic records in the database, we have very detailed classifications that include their governance, their economic model, and very detailed subject classifications. And also whether an organisation is a member of a consortia. So, and quite a lot more than I've mentioned. We also include some external metadata. So we include the Open Funder Registry ID. We include external tiers such as GISC and Carnegie classifications. And we also include the ISNI, identifier for organisations, because there's a personal bit of the ISNI and there's an organisational bit of the ISNI. And Ringgold is a registration authority for ISNI, and we've allocated ISNIs to pretty much all of the organisations in the Identify database. And a quick word about ISNI. ISNI is a bridge identifier, which I mentioned before. It's an open bridge identifier, and it sits above proprietary data sets and can link them together. It holds minimal metadata, unlike the Ringgold ID or the Dun & Bradstreet or IPEDS. The ISNI ID is an ISO standard. It's governed and regulated by the ISNI International Agency. And Ringgold provides the Open ISNI for Organisations service, which allows us to share the ISNI identifiers and database data for the organisations to the world. It's completely open. And through this project, we provide a downloadable database, a web service API, and a website for the general public to use ISNI's identifiers. So we're now going to take a look at some linking scenarios, and my colleague Christine Orr will take you through these. So over to you, Christine.
Hi everyone, and thanks for spending some time with us today. As Diane mentioned at the top of the hour, we work with clients from all different sectors of scholarly publishing and research and association land, and very often the problems are the same. We all generate a lot of data, and so we spend a lot of time helping folks kind of get their data sorted and structured so that they can combine it and link it and utilize it for various business purposes. So we thought what we'd do for a few minutes here is take a look at our fictional International Broken Bone Society, which is a fictional society publisher. And we've just kind of created them to have a nice place to talk about some ways to kind of start small and then build up, linking your data for different business purposes. So IBBS, they're going to experience some of the most common data problems that we see, and they have the resulting issues. They can't get a good reporting, so that data and information can't be shared across departments, let's say from their publishing to their association management side. Evidence-based decisions are really hard to reach because the reporting is not trustworthy. They eyeball their data and say, gosh, I can see all those duplicates there. There's a lot of blanks, things like that. And both the pubs team and the association management and member team are kind of hampered by this data friction. So let's take a look at how they have started to work kind of from the inside out. Let's take it from a single silo across the enterprise and then look at how how it's sensible to kind of start layering in external data sources and enrichment sources. Okay, so looking at one single silo, and this is very often how folks will approach us, or a very common starting place is just in like the fulfillment system or in the association management system like we see here. IBBS is holding all of their association information within the AMS, and I know for a lot of people this is kind of the one place where all of that lives. And as you can see here, they've got a couple of different entities for University of California, Riverside, and if we eyeball that, we know that's all the same organization, but look, they've got like 3 different account IDs, and bits of the UC Riverside business or engagement with IBBS is spread across those multiple accounts. We see one account has paid for exhibit space at their annual meeting. Another one seems to have some volunteers and meeting attendees attached. The student chapter is someplace else, and they all have members affiliated with them, okay? So we're not getting a comprehensive picture here. These disconnected records are preventing the AMS for giving them clear insight into the membership activity and servicing those members based on accurate information. So, this is a really common problem, and I know for associations, one of their keys is, we want to look at engagement, or heck, put the publisher hat on. What is our total 360 engagement with a particular organization? How can we service them well with, say, an accurate holdings report or accurate business intelligence, from a strategic or a tactical level? Not having that 360 view, even coming out of one system, can really hamper us. So let's go to the next slide and take a look at how embedding persistent identifiers can start to consolidate this information and make the AMS a little bit more functional for them. So what they've done is append a persistent ID to each account record and defined, okay, all those, we don't care how they're spelled, doesn't matter. They can keep their little acronyms, and we may even want to keep these separate accounts. But I know for sure, as defined by the Ringgold ID, might be defined by another ID like iPads or something else, but as defined by the Ringgold ID, these are the same exact organization. So I can now tie this data together, okay? And now I have a comprehensive picture of my engagement with UC Riverside. So I've got 75 meeting attendees. I know my student chapters here. They've spent all this money on exhibit space, and I've got 47 members that have membership subscriptions. A note on the kind of how-to from here, which Diane's going to cover a little bit more as we go along. But when you append a persistent identifier within a system like this, you can then choose to do two things. You can actually make the decision. We are going to merge these records. Okay, we've identified and disambiguated who is exactly who, okay, which organization is which organization, and we're going to collapse those records. Or you can use the persistent ID. You can structure your AMS or your CRM or whatever your system is to utilize and leverage that persistent ID as a link. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to collapse the record. So it depends on what your data strategy is, and you may have very good business reasons for wanting to have, separate accounts. I used to talk to a lot of publishers who, Harvard has a very distributed library system, and we knew they were all Harvard, but it was really important to have, just the astronomy stuff at this library and just the health stuff at the health library and all of that. So, for invoicing purposes, for example, perfectly good business reason to not merge those records, but be able to link them and know for sure that they were all related, okay? So either way, you now have a clean system from which you can glean accurate and comprehensive information, okay? So again, that's just one system. So let's take a look next at how IBBS is going to start to get a wider view of things, and by looping in what's going to happen on the publication side, okay? So as Diane said earlier, using a persistent identifier for organizations or people or entities like things like our journals, we all use the ISSN or DOIs for articles and things like that. Having that common language be spoken by all of your in-house systems, and let's face it, we all have a lot of systems, okay? Nobody's just running one system, allows you to then layer in those data and join it from multiple systems, compare them, contrast them, and kind of answer the business questions that we all need to. So that connected data now becomes, our AMS and our CRM at IBBS are talking the same language now. So now what we can do is have a complete 360 idea of engagement at UC Riverside. What's happening on the member side, what's happening with publications, all right? And we can join that information together. All right, and by having this join available, again, doesn't always have to be super sophisticated. You can integrate the systems, you can build a data warehouse, do different things, or you can even just be able to compare things with a VLOOKUP from a spreadsheet you got out of the AMS and a spreadsheet you got out of the CRM. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a big analytics system, but at least you'll be able to tie things together, even in an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so some questions that IBBS can now answer is, hey, what organizations are all of my members affiliated with, and are any of them not licensing our content? Or, hey, we would love to be able to offer organizational memberships, corporate memberships, let's say, to our society. And now I can make this, this offering understanding all of my financial engagement with that particular company, okay? So let's now move over and look at going beyond the organization, since we've sorted out all of our internal data silos. Okay, and as Diane said before, a lot of persistent identifier systems have tons of metadata attached to them, and what we will often see is folks loop in not only Ringgold, but things like Dun & Bradstreet or iPads or other things, okay, to be able to bring multiple data sets together and augment information in really sophisticated ways, okay? So in the case of IBBS, they're using the Ringgold ID, okay, to pull in identify metadata like location, and they understand that this is, Ringgold says it's an A4, which in our lingo means it's a research-heavy educational organization. We're giving them some FTE information, and yes, they have a medical school. Now, let's pretend IBBS has a tiered subscription system that says, all right, we take into account not only like how big the school is, but do they have a medical school? How many students are there? That kind of thing. And together with like their usage or other subscription factors that would be known in-house. So by having all of this internal data be augmented with something else that they don't have to collect and report or have their clients or customers come in and self-report, they can just link to that from another reliable data source. Now they've kind of created some efficiencies, saved some time, and allowed them to accurately apply their business rules by appending their own internal information with something from the outside. Okay, and as Ringgold, again, one of our real dream scenarios is for folks to be able to link multiple data sets together. We include, and Diane mentioned this in one of the slides above, we also include additional persistent identifiers like IPEDs, okay, to allow people to kind of keep adding links to that chain. All right, so let's move to the next slide and see how folks can leverage multiple sources together. Okay, so we've now seen how we can pull in one additional data source, Ringgold, but Ringgold's going to give you this hook to IPEDs, right? Also to ISNI. Just so you see that box on the upper left side, external metadata, is the Ringgold additional IDs that we carry. Okay, so you'll see the ISNI, which is a bridge to other things. Okay, we have the Open Funder Registry ID, which allows for linking over to, oh, pardon me, I'm behind on my internal slides over here. The OFR links over to the Crossref Open Funder Registry ID. So there you can then link to all of the DOIs and articles funded by UC Riverside. Looking here in IPEDS, we can see they also hold much more granular student information. By the way, IPEDS, for anyone who does not know, is data collected by the U.S. government for academic institutions in the states, okay? And they hold an enormous amount of data. So they've, you'll see that second box there has, total expenditures, so you can see their budgets, you can see additional granular information on tuition fees, enrollment data, and all kinds of things. So again, folks are able to leverage multiple persistent identifiers to pull in relevant information from multiple sources, creating an even bigger picture. So let's look at how we can expand this out even further. Okay, move this over. And one point I want to make, and I think it's really clear to most of the folks on the call, scholarship and research is really one big interconnected ecosystem. And the more robustly you're using persistent identifiers, the more options you have to build your intelligence and to ensure also that your data is interoperable and understood by business partners and others. So our friends at IBBS have now hit the dream scenario. They have created a data warehouse. They've got common persistent identifiers for all entity types, people, places, and things embedded in all the relevant places, and they're able to hook to multiple sources, okay? And remember, all of these external sources like us or Dun & Bradstreet or IPEDS, they're created for different spheres of the industry for different reasons, so they're all going to tell you different things. So the more that you can utilize persistent identifiers to loop that data in, again, more options you have. All right, and now what we're going to do, I'm going to turn it back over to Diane, and we're going to look at how we can start linking this data together. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Christine. So we've talked about some linking scenarios, but how can you transform your data into linkable assets, and where do you start? This can be small scale or large scale, but it should be a continuous process, not just a one-off. We all have data in legacy systems, but we are also capturing new data all of the time. So I'm going to briefly go through this process step by step, but basically it's a planning process. It's looking at what you have, it's cleaning your existing data and improving capture of new data, but it carries on. You have to monitor it and keep going. So you start with really your planning. So what questions are you trying to answer? Christine's given some examples already. But for instance, what organizations are our members affiliated with? Are they already customers? So that's linking two sets. There's lots of questions you could answer here. So that's the first step. You then need to think about where that data is. So what data sources might hold the answers? So if you're looking for author information, it might be in your editorial system. If you're a publisher, If you're looking for customer information, it might be in your CRM, it might be in your fulfillment system. So you need to review your data sources, the value to the organisation, and in answering your business question. Is one data set more important? Is it held in a leading system? Is it in a subsidiary system? Because the leading systems are critical for data capture. You might find you've got multiple data sources, lots of system silos, which we've talked about already, or multiple locations. You might have geographic data silos. That's often the case with companies who've got perhaps a US office and a European office. And you might have data entered by different people for different purposes. You might have data from third parties or partners in the supply chain, or you may have bought data in from external sources. So you need to find which sources are the ones you need, and you need to assess the quality of the data in those sources. Is it complete? Is it up to date? Just how is it looking really? So the third step in that little process diagram I showed you is cleaning the legacy data. Do you need to clean everything? You've probably got quite a lot of legacy data, or do you just need the last year, last couple of years? Or do you need everything, completely everything? Because that can be quite a big task for established organisations, perhaps less so if you're a startup. Are there some quick wins? Are there simple things that you can actually do yourself to perhaps deduplicate things, or clean up the data quickly? Can you automate anything just to save you time and energy? Can you do it in-house yourself, or should you outsource to a third party like Ringgold or Dun & Bradstreet? There's lots and lots of vendors out there doing providing services like this. The benefit with using an external party is that not only is your data deduplicated and disambiguated, but it's enriched usually with persistent IDs and descriptive metadata. And of course, as we've seen, that means you don't have to check all your location information because it's probably been provided as part of the metadata. So it just adding the metadata just saves you a huge amount of time. So the next step is looking at your new data and improving data capture. And improving data capture is the best way to ensure clean data going forward. Alternatively, you can implement a periodic cleansing of data for new records, but I think probably improving data capture is your best way forward. So think about how you capture data. Do you use web forms? I think you probably should. And if so, make sure they're consistent. Think about business rules. Don't allow people to save incomplete records, because that's just going to cause you some pain later on when you try to analyze the data and you find that the address is missing or the country's missing or something like that. Can you use a drop down for address information, something like that, using an authority file, a postcode lookup, postcode checker, or using the Ringgold database API or a local loader database to provide an organizational selection? If you did something like that, and many of our customers are doing this, it would immediately capture the Ringgold ID at the point of data entry and all the associated metadata for that record. So the address, all the location information, everything else, the descriptive information, and all the other identifiers we capture. So that means you've got all of the information you need in your web forms, or it might be in the CRIS system, or it might be in your CRM. If you use a standard taxonomy for, say, the country information across all your data sets, it means that integrating your data later on is going to be much easier, and it's easier to analyze and report. So make persistent IDs a requirement, and make your web forms consistent across your systems. And at all costs, avoid free text, because it's just going to cause you all the problems that you probably already got with your legacy data. But do be aware that it's an ongoing process rather than a one-time initiative. And staff need to be aware of the importance of the business rules and why you're doing this, because it isn't just a nuisance. They've got to look something up. I mean, it's important because you're then starting with structured data, which is going to be helpful to you in the future. So we're going to round up by looking at how one of our clients linked data sets to provide a 360-degree view of their business. Excuse me. Okay. So the challenge was for this publisher, it was an established publisher. They had many years of customer records, which had been created in multiple independent platforms and data sets. Some were legacy systems, some were brought in through acquisition. So they had no control over the data they were getting. And that resulted in a lot of duplicates, as Christine showed you, and ambiguous records. And with such a broad portfolio, they had a broad portfolio of content types, and it was very difficult for them to get a complete sense of their customers and their entitlements for all the different products that they had: journals, books, reference works, and online products. So our client realized that a 360-degree view of each customer with clear links between the data held in all of their systems, they'd be able to provide a much better service to clients and foster a better understanding by their staff and management. And the solution was going in a way through the process that I mentioned earlier. They first addressed their existing customer records, and they sent Ringgold customer data for key products, journals, books, reference works, and electronic products for an identify audit. We audited the records and we normalized them against the identified database, and we sent them back to the client with the Ringgold ID plus all of the metadata and the upward hierarchies for each customer. The resulting audit files actually show that a large proportion of the records belong to duplicate organizations. But the client was now in a position to use the Ringgold ID to link duplicate records together, as Christine showed. And with a unique Ringgold ID allocated to every organizational customer, our client could start to build up a comprehensive and accurate view of each customer's product portfolio and entitlements. And for new records, the client developed a process for every customer record. They trained their staff to search our online interface, which is Identify Online, to look up the organisation. They allocated a Ringgold ID to each new record. And where an organisation didn't currently exist in the Identify database, we created a new record and a Ringgold ID and all the metadata and the upward hierarchy. So the client now had a complete set of master Identify records for all customers. And they also developed rules for data governance and for entitlement levels, ensuring that the customer records were treated in a consistent manner with their licensing policy. So how did they implement this? Our client defined their leading systems. So they broke everything into leading, second tier, and reporting. So the leading systems were the ones where they were bringing in new data. So it would be customer, orders, authors, and those are the records that we audited. And then once they've got the Ringgold IDs in, they fed those into the CRM and the publishing platform, and then the reporting systems were able to utilize those as well. So all systems are now linked using the Ringgold ID, and they all sort of speak the same language, so everything's much clearer. Ringgold is a data company, and we can certainly help you clean and disambiguate, as we've said, and structure your data, but we can't really provide detailed help with implementation. However, many of our customers has successfully implemented the Ringgold ID across all of their systems. And this client in question did actually talk to some of our other customers and receive some really helpful advice on how to do it. I mean, everyone's got different systems, so you can't come up with a solution that's going to be right for everybody. But the entire project took 6 to 7 months to complete, including the Ringgold Identify audit work. So it gives you a sense of timing, and they're a fairly large publisher as well. So what were the final outcomes? Increased efficiency. There's a lot of process efficiency just because of the Ringgold ID there. So for access management, they knew exactly who the customers were for marketing and e-commerce. It improved the accuracy of reporting because more than 70% of their records were duplicates based on the academic top level which they used. So using the Ringgold ID to join the data has had a really significant impact for them. And the use of reporting tools has tripled because people trust them. And the client then, they were using previously loads of Excel spreadsheets for reporting, and they've retired all those now. And people are just using the corporate reporting tools because they're trustworthy. There was a decrease of access claims, so as a result, fewer resources were needed in customer service, and I know a lot of our customers have found this also, so they're able to redeploy those resources elsewhere. Less time required to accurately import customer data because you're capturing structured data right from the get-go. And many of their marketing records now have a Ringgold ID, so they know exactly where which institutions they're from, and that's helping marketing and sales. So they're able to profile their customers, and they can use the Identify database to look for more potential customers with a similar profile that aren't currently customers. And there's a quote there from the project manager. They've seen a significant process efficiency from the implementation of the Ringgold ID across systems, and they've reached a 360-degree view of customer data intelligence, allowing them to make better choices to improve the customer experience and move towards the publishing of the future. So I hope the talk today has been helpful and informative. And just in summary, just to go over what we've really covered today. Think about the business questions you want to answer and how the data that you already hold can help you. Clean and disambiguate your data. Look at the legacy data and include persistent IDs where possible. Enrich with metadata to save you time, e.g. standardizing location information or adding classifications. And think about the process of data capture for new data. Think about data governance rules to make sure your new data is fit for purpose from day one. So in terms of linking, start with one system, expand to others, and reach outside the organisation to enrich your data, as Christine discussed. So build knowledge and experience in using your data. Your data are assets, so look after them, and they will reward you with new applications and business insights. So back to Tim Berners-Lee, a very relevant quote: look after your data, because it will outlive all your systems. So that's pretty much everything for today. Thanks to everyone for taking the time to join us. I hope you found the presentation helpful, and hopefully we've got some questions, so we can take questions now if there are any.
Yes, we do have a few questions. So okay. If anyone has other questions, please feel free to submit them. So the first question, Diane, is how often are FTE figures updated? What sources are used to find FTEs? And so this is referring to the Ringgold Identify database.
Okay, well, we find the figures from the organisation's website, and we only include the FTE figures when we are sure they're reliable, and if there's any ambiguity there, we just don't include them. And they're updated regularly. It really depends on how often we're updating that particular record, but they are reviewed. We have a timestamp project in which we review all the records within a certain period, say if it's a couple of years. So they should be fairly up to date. I don't know if you want to add anything, Christine?
Yeah, I think what we at Ringgold use is really what the organization says about themselves. What do they publish on their website? We don't kind of scrape things from other places and pull it in. Really, we really go out and investigate, from the primary source, okay, and utilize and structure that information. And I think the larger issue is, whatever persistent identifier system you're using, and as Diane mentioned, so many of them are connected to additional pieces of metadata. Look into that. Find out because if you're using it truly to enrich your own understanding of your organizations or individuals or whatever else you're using this external data source for, check on what is the curation policy. You want to make sure, if you're making business decisions based on data you're bringing in, you want to know what the curation policy is, how frequently, how responsive that organization is to changes in the real world, and changes, just as Diane said, just from a timestamp perspective. This record hasn't been checked in so long. All right, is there some kind of an automatic process that brings it to the top of the batting order? Because I think that's, if you're making business decisions based on external sources, that's one of the things you want to think about. And one other thing that we actually didn't cover, but I think is critical, is in addition to persistent identifiers, having structured taxonomies within those persistent identifier systems. For example, we happen to use the ISO country code list. We don't just put in free text for country names and things like that. Every time anyone goes to buy something from Amazon, right, you get that drop-down list of the states. That's a taxonomy. They don't have you put in, I'm from Virginia, I'm from Pennsylvania, and you just free text and put that stuff in. So standard taxonomies for as many metadata elements as possible is another way to be able to kind of standardize your intelligence. So let's say you are doing work on, standardize, getting your demographics down. How many clients or folks do we have in this country, that country? Only if your country names are standardized are you using a standard taxonomy. Can you even answer that question? So just a few extra points there. Okay.
Okay. And we had actually also had a question also related to our Identify database about, if we are connecting to the DUNS IDs. So I thought it might be helpful if you guys could talk a little bit about why we choose the other identifiers that we do to map our data to.
Sure. Or Diane, did you want to jump in on it, or?
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the first thing is that International Standard Name Identifier, the ISNI, is an ISO standard. It's free to use by anyone, and so that's really kind of the link to the called the link to the beyond. Okay, those ISNIs are available to anyone, and anyone could be embedding them in their data sets. We've chosen to work with and bring in, because they're highly relevant to our clients. And I'll be frank, some of the ones that we use are open. The Open Funder Registry is open. We do the actual labor to review that list, ensure it is mapped accurately and correctly to the Ringgold stuff. The DUN stuff is frankly proprietary, so it would take a whole nother level of business arrangement in order to be able to do that. However, let's say the DUNS people, the Dun & Bradstreet people, ever catch wind of ISNI and they plug it in, well then great, you are in a perfect place to hop to that and any other data set that chooses to use that international standard.
And just to add, if there are, certainly people that we're working with, if there are other IDs that people feel that we should be including, then we're always open to including new IDs.
Absolutely.
That will help our customers.
Yeah, because it is critical. We do want you to be able to try to link to as much as is relevant for you.
Okay. Our next question is really workflow related about data linking. How would you hold entitlement records and link this to the relevant IP addresses for the component institutions?
I think that has to do with making sure your entitlement and your IPs, your access and authentication, again, are speaking the same language. I can tell you from experience, many of our publishers, and we see this after having worked with folks' data for so long, much of the data that folks have on their customers, their subscribers, tends to be quite invoicing related. Okay, it's where do we send that invoice? Who bought this? And the knowledge about what does it cover? Okay, we sold this license to this, let's say, department, but guess what? It's a site license and the whole university is included. Or this, the New York office of, I'm just making something up, 3M, okay, bought this journal subscription or journal package, but really we signed a global license for all their research labs. Are those research labs set up any place? Do we have that captured? So I think there's a couple of data, this is like building the data chain and making sure that you've captured enough information in the first place in your entitlement system, and then you're able to speak the same language too, wherever those IPs are coming from. Diane, did you want to add to that? It's
No,
kind
I
of a
think
tricky
as you
one, but
say, well, it's linking. So if you know the entitlement of a particular organisation and you have the IP and you can link to that organisation, then you can certainly then get a better sense of that through the organisation. But yeah.
Yeah, and we had one more question come in. What standard taxonomy is used for countries listed in Ringgold? Well, we use the ISO 2. It's called the ISO 2 country codes for country codes, which is a 2-letter, just like it sounds. It's a 2-letter thing. But then there must be a standard map to that. I'll have to get back to you guys on exactly how that is structured. But it is standardized. We don't just free text the countries there.
And that's all the questions that we have right now.
Okay.
Okay, well, if you have any other questions, please drop us an email. Always happy to help. So if there's nothing else, then just thank you for your time today. I hope it was useful and informative for you. And as I say, if you've got any questions, then please let us know. And we'll be sending the slides and the recording to you if you want to have another look. Okay. So thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.